Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to allow me welcome a gentleman who has really nurtured great talent in Uganda, not only in Uganda, but in Africa. And his main purpose in life is to unleash the genius in everybody. And you know, this gentleman is one of the people we know in this country who loves football. Many of you may not know that he loves football so much that he was a football player. He was a captain at Makerere University for a certain football club at the time, those who went to Makerere University. And then also, you know, he started an organization way back in 1997 called Friends of Football. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Baker Magunda is one of the business executives in Africa. If you want to argue with me, wait for me at the Johnny Walker Bar. But he has done so well. He has raised our flag as Ugandans so high in East Africa, in Africa, and I know the world knows about Baker Magunda. Baker is currently the Chief Growth Officer at Dance Africa Corporation. The other key thing is that Baker is the chairman of Stanbic Holdings. I saw Stanbic Bank here. I hope they're still here, the Stanbic Bank table. If you guys have left, I don't know whether your jobs are secured, but it's okay. That's a conversation of another day. But Baker, to be honest, has been around for quite some time, is a household name, but he has also worked for Diageo for like 23 years. And he was the first Ugandan CEO at Uganda Breweries. Nobody's clapping, or am I speaking to myself? Thank you, ladies. Thank you, thank you. But that is who Baker is. Talk about, you know, one of the finest of them all in corporate business executive, someone who is so passionate about people, someone who has grown people, who has grown talent, who has grown businesses. The name will pop up, and that's Baker Magunda. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and join me in welcoming Baker to give us his keynote and his thoughts about marketers and whether we are endangered or not. Baker.
Good evening, friends. I had been told that I'll be standing here to speak to you at 7, so it's 3 hours late. You blame it on the MC, right? I've been here since 5:30, so blame it on her. Listen, always a pleasure to be back home. Uganda is home, so I miss it a lot, so thanks for inviting me again, William. William and I have been friends because we started this thing many years ago at the Sheraton. People might not remember. So it's good to be back here to share my opinion. Mine is an opinion, so don't argue about it. It's just an opinion, all right? And when the question was asked, I didn't know, is it rhetorical or is it a serious question? So William being a jolly guy, I thought, this was just a rhetorical question. It's not a serious question, really. Because I do believe that in spite of everything else that is being said about technology, the most secure job there is for a good marketer. And I qualify it. It's not that people who are doing marketing are marketers. And I'll come to that. I'll speak to it. So good marketers, you are safe and secure. In fact, the reason you are hearing accountants leaving what they trained to do to come to marketing, because it is exciting here and it is boring there. So you are secure, guys. You're really secure. Don't worry about this. So when this question was asked, I thought about, you can answer this many ways. Is it an ethical question? Or is it a business question? Or is it a professional question? Or is it just a social question? When I left my O levels, I was a very good scientist. So I had been designed to go and do science at high school. So I decided to go back to the most famous school at the time, Namasagali College, for my high school, and I chose to do human sciences, which other people call arts. When I finished university, and I chose to join the Coca-Cola company as a graduate trainee, my dad asked me, what is it you're going to be doing at Coke? I told him, I'm super excited. I've been invited to join a graduate program for marketing people. For you who are Ugandans, until recently, marketing people were called abatembei, hawkers. So my dad was extremely disappointed that after doing so well at university, I'm only going to become a hawker. Marketing has evolved over time, and it is one of the most misunderstood things. And because it is misunderstood, sometimes discussions like this come up. So let me just do my bit in allaying the fears of those who might be scared. It evolves, you have to be good, you have to evolve with it. It is not true that everybody who is occupying a marketing job is a marketer. It's not. So all you have to do is transform yourself into a good marketer first. All right? That's the message I want to leave in the room. Transform yourself into a good marketer first. Here is my story. To practice marketing, you always have to care about 3 plus 6 things. I'll talk about the 3 and then the other 6. The 3 things are all centered about the consumer. What are they? Do you understand your consumer? Other people call it empathy. Do you truly understand the context in which you are practicing marketing? Talk about the trends. And then the final thing is, what are the expectations of the job at the time you're doing it? If you bring those 3 things together, you'll be good. What are the expectations? Do you understand the consumer deeply, consumer empathy, and the context in which you're doing the job? Those are the 3. On the other 6 is to understand why people buy. People do not buy because you've analyzed them to death, or they don't. People buy because of only 6 things. One is because what you're selling gives them more. Sometimes because what you're selling gives them less. It elevates their experiences or gives them fun. They can afford it. They can find it. And you know what? It works. Those are the 6 fundamental reasons why people buy. And a marketer who gets confused, then you might measure market share, you might measure conversion, and all these nice things we all measure. You always have to ask yourself the question, what of the 6 reasons that is driving your share? If it's none of the 6 or the 3, you have a problem. So I'll speak to some of these very quickly. Let me start with the context. The context of this discussion of questioning marketing always, and I use the word always, comes up when there is an economic flux. When organizations are under pressure, when consumers are chasing for value, there is always a question, does brand marketing really work? After all consumers are seeking for is something that works at the cheapest possible price. That is what always happens, right? And in asking that question, we forget that the fundamental foundation for marketing is laid on the traditional 4 P's plus the new 4, which are the 8 P's. And one of them is product. Does your product work? And the other is price. Is your price accessible? So it is okay sometimes when consumers are under economic pressure that they seek for value over and above the brand promises. And I'll come to that. So understanding the context is that the consumer we are selling to now is under flux. And I'll give you some examples. From a social point of view, when I was still doing marketing in Uganda, We had people who were called male and other people were called female. Marketers these days are dealing with fluid individuals, isn't it? They are neither male, they are neither female. Therefore, you have to understand, how then do I deal with this individual? That's a social flux, isn't it? We always got worried when our consumer base was growing old. We were told, oh, one of the problems I have is I don't have enough young consumers in my consumer base. The highest spenders in the world now are the retired old millionaires. They are driving trends. It is them buying the best Range Rovers. It is them buying the yachts. It is them buying the best estates. It is them influencing furniture. The most in-thing furniture now in the world is retro. It's not the new, it's the retro. And it's being influenced by the taste of the retired millionaires. So for a marketer not to understand that context, you miss the opportunity. So it is the context in which you're marketing. The other thing which is about society is that the population structure is changing. It is no longer about rural or urban. It is both. It is both. One individual both lives in the city and in the countryside, and therefore their decision and behavior is driven by both influences. Over the weekend, they're in shags, as we call it in Kenya. Shags means village. And during the week, they're in the city. But both things are influencing them. So it's no longer necessary for you to categorize your consumer as rural or urban. It doesn't just make sense. So enough on consumer context and social. Technology, technology enables and accelerates disruptions. That is all it does. It enables and accelerates disruptions. And what has technology done to the consumer we market to? It has done three things. How do they socialize? How do they consume information? How do they make decisions to buy? Those are the three things that really technology has done. But what has not changed is that human emotion still exists. Unfortunately, for me, being an economist, I know while I was told in economics class that consumers are rational. In many years of practicing marketing, I know consumers are irrational. They're irrational, and that's why they buy things at premium prices, even themselves cannot explain why they had to pay that amount of money, but they just love it. Our role as marketing is to blur the choice between rational and irrational, and that's where the value really lies. On economic, we do know people are under pressure. All researches you're reading, and I'm sure you have the same information I do have, people are under pressure. And because they're under pressure, they are looking for fewer things, more basic things, and they are looking for things that work and they trust. So while on one side you think, because they are under so much economic pressure, they are only going to be chasing after things that are cheap, it is at that time that they don't want to experiment with brands they don't trust. It is at this point when consumers are actually shifting brands or prostituting brands that there is a big opportunity for a marketing person to say, you know what, I know you're under pressure, you will not take something which won't work. So build trust and faith in the product that you offer during a crisis, all right? I think the other for me is the gap between those who have and those who don't. As big cities become bigger, for us who are practicing marketing, unfortunately, we are confronted with a population that is hurting because as the people flow from the villages into the cities, they confront inequality. And it is inequality which is the problem. It's not absolute poverty. So when somebody is seated on the other side of Naguru Hill and looks down in the morning, they're seated in a slum, but there are people playing golf at 9. How does it make them feel? The guy is so rich that he can afford to play golf at 9. Meanwhile, the guy in the slum in Naguru is looking, he doesn't know whether he'll have lunch. It is that creates the sense of, therefore, for me as a consumer, how are you going to talk to me in a way that I can relate with you as the brand? And I'll come to some of the proposals that I have of what else we could do. Environmental. We do know that for us who in marketing, consumers are now really, really concerned about what we do and say about the environment. Ensuring that the products are recyclable, the packaging is not one that destroys the environment, energy use, and what we say about that, all right? So all of this is context. The final thing on context is politics. There's a lot of insurgencies across the world, political insurgents, small parties, young parties, of angry people. Actually, people hunkering in, whether it is in France or in Samalema in South Africa, whatever, there is a huge insurgency of political dissatisfaction. And how does that manifest itself in consumers? Consumers do not trust big organizations. Consumers actually do not trust brands. And that's the reality. So once you accept that that's the context in which you are working, then what do you do about this? In 2023, there are some really significant things happening that I would be leaving with you in the room as marketing people. One is the economic crisis means that people are in a survival mode. And when people are in a survival mode, what is it they do and how do they make the choices? We shall come to that. Loss of confidence in leadership is a big thing. So big brands are losing consumers faster than insurgent brands. It's a phenomenon you are seeing in government, it's a phenomenon you're seeing in private sector, it's a phenomenon you're seeing in industry, and that is also affecting big brands across the world. Consumers actually, post-COVID, are swinging back into aspirational brands faster. There was always a view that because of what COVID did, and then we came into the global economic crisis, premium aspirational brands are in trouble. It's not true. Actually, we are seeing aspirational brands grow faster. My colleagues who work at Johnnie Walker possibly would confirm that Johnnie Walker is growing fastest during and after COVID than it did before. And we see that with many other premium brands across the world. Why is that? The threat of death that COVID reminded people, people just want to give themselves a good time. People just want to treat themselves well. People want to consume better. People want to look after themselves, all right? And I think the other trend that we're seeing is the one of well-being. People really looking after themselves and ensuring they eat well, they look good, they sleep well, they have a balanced life. So those are major trends that we are seeing in 2023 that as marketing people you might want to care about in case you're not doing that already. But therefore, for consumers who are in a flux, as I've described here, what do you do? So yes, Henry, you're right. Brands are no longer in control. The truth is, brands are no longer in control, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Because once you are not in control, the expectation from society for you to lead them becomes less. So the pressure for you as a marketing person is to have a conversation. Traditional, I like going between marketing and sales because, like Henry says, the two things are fusing and they're mashing. One of the interesting trends that we're seeing is that actually there was a lot of hula about e-commerce and, oh yeah, this is the death of traditional trade. It is funny that actually traditional trade has become stronger and on-premise consumption has become stronger. The drivers being two, it is cheaper, and number two, the serving of single serves, the sachets or little packs. You won't get that a lot if you go to Carrefour or you go to some of the supermarkets. So the resilience of the traditional trade means something for the marketing team and the marketing people. So for me, if you were a brand manager now in Uganda, you'd be saying, have I built strong enough a plan to continue growing my brands in the three areas where growth is coming from? It's coming from traditional trade, all right? It's coming from single serve SKUs, and it's coming from occasions where more than one person is using your product. So it is group consumption. The myth that Africans are like white people, they buy things for themselves as individuals, is not true. In most of Africa, what we are seeing is that consumption decisions are driven by a unit more than the individual who is buying. I'm a mother buying for the children. It works for the children. I'm the head of family. It works for the family. I'm in an industry now where we sell hygiene and personal care. For people who have worked for brands like Unilever would know this. One of the reasons liquid detergents are not very popular in Africa because it's difficult to measure the use per occasion. Imagine you have a teenager and you give them liquid soap or shower gel to go to, the thing might be empty by the time the guy is finished showering. So when that kind of head of family is making a decision, it's just not for them, but it's in the behavior that exists for the people they look after and the people who depend on them. So as you are targeting who the shopper, who the decision maker is, you also need to understand the context in which they live, and the decisions are driven by how the behavior in the family or the immediate unit influences the brand usage, okay? Because consumers are so burdened and are adapting to this new reality of social economic flux, a survey was done recently in Kenya, in East Africa, and 44% of people feel they have less income than they had a year ago, and 36% of people are super worried about unemployment, loss of jobs, all right? Those are two big things which are really current and real for the consumers. And therefore, how are they manifesting that behavior in interaction with your brands? One is they just want things that work. So doing fancy campaigns at the moment is a good thing, but be careful. They're only listening for what are the best messages in the thing. Does it work? Is it higher value? Is it better? Has it less this? Has it more of that? Going back to the 6 reasons that consumers buy, reasons why consumers buy. So as you develop your campaigns now, do not forget, consumers are really listening for what is the real message. Are you giving me more? Is it less carbs? Is it more proteins? You have to be back to the basics, all right? The second thing is about consumers are really worried about the future planning. So just know that if somebody is earning 10,000 a day, their ability to think about, if I don't go to that construction site tomorrow and earn another 10,000, I still have a family to feed. So consumers are thinking more about, I've got an income now, I may not have it tomorrow, and therefore they are delaying some consumption decisions that they used to make without even thinking about it a lot about a year ago or so. So if I were somebody who is doing marketing in Uganda now, I would be saying, what percentage of income decision can I hold on to every day? You know, so understanding how consumers are allocating their wallet and being able to participate in those decisions. And for you who have either practicing, customer experience, you will know that tracing the consumer journey and mapping it against your product, determining what are the touch points for my product for this consumer in the day, it will give you some insights on where you can participate in their spend decisions, all right? Understanding what has shifted in the way consumers are spending is another very important thing that I'll be speaking to just in a minute, right? There's uncertainty, and because there is uncertainty, people are questioning, is it important for me to remain loyal, all right? But it's true that a loyal consumer is very useful to your brand over time. What I think needs to change for a person practicing marketing now is think about every consumer every day as if they are new consumers you're just recruiting. It doesn't matter that they buy you every day, they go to the shop. Every time think about them as, if I'm recruiting this person for the first time, how would I speak to them? How do I position my product? Because do you know what? Tomorrow, the shopper missions are very many. The competing decisions they have to make for limited income are a lot. And like I said, they're just looking for the best things that work for them every day. So a study was done by Nielsen. I was one of the speakers 3 months ago or so. on what are the insights in East Africa, and they really presented great work that they had, done across Africa. For East Africa, including Uganda, 7 out of 10 consumers have changed brands in any category over the last 1 year. 7 out of 10. So consumers are buying something different. 7 consumers out of 10 are buying something different this year compared to a year ago. When you think about that, you're like, oh my God. But when we went through the data, and this is where I disagree with Henry, and I'm seeing chairs here, I hope we are going to disagree. What came through that categories that had strong brands had less switching? And listen to this, in East Africa, the categories that had the lowest switching were Femicare, because they have strong brands. I don't want to give anybody airtime, but because they have strong brands. Number 2, alcohol, because alcohol has got very, very strong brands. CSDs, soft drinks, had very low switching, again, because they had very strong brands. While the more commoditized and the weaker categories had the most switching. Top of the list was telecoms. Top of the list was telecoms. Somebody doesn't care what airtime, where it comes from, it works. But if somebody is going to drink something, they care about what they drink. So depending on which category you are, you have to be careful. There are categories that lend themselves to very strong brands, like those I've talked about. There are categories which do not and are driven by product efficacy. So if I were going to be hanging around with Airtel, the most important thing for me is efficacy. Does the thing work? Does it do what it promises? If I'm going to be hanging around with John Walker Blue, the consideration is, how do I look? How does it make me look? Because at the end of the day, it might be alcohol, fine, but it's a blue label, come on. So it makes me look different, makes me look better. The phone line I've called you on, maybe not. So as marketers, the principles might be the same, but just understanding that there are some categories that need different nuancing and looking at that differently. I think the other thing is to then say, so what does all of this mean, all right? Because the question on the board is there danger for marketers? I'm saying there is no danger for marketing, but there are some people who are seated in marketing jobs. Of course, they will be asked to leave. I'm not surprised people are being asked to leave in 38 months. If you're not doing your job, you're not evolving with the discipline, of course they'll ask you to leave. Because any organization that is serious about proofing their future growth, they have to have the sharpest marketers in town. They have to. And it is less important whether you studied engineering or whatever. Do you understand the insights? Can you apply them? Can you execute campaigns and execute them properly? Do you understand what competition is doing, and are you going to keep ahead of them? Being where the consumers are. So Henry is right. For me, the best research is walk out your office, wander around the streets, go and hear consumers give you the unfiltered truth. I don't like focus groups anymore because you invite them, you give them chips and chicken, air conditioned. Of course, they can guess that you want a good answer. They will give you the good answer. If you want to hear how it is, go to a window market. Don't tell them who you are, and just listen. So listening to consumers in their environment, I think Henry is right, gives you the best insights, right? So if I were a marketing person, I think there's all AI tools and analytics and everything else, but you're dealing with emotional people. If I tell you I don't like you in a cold voice, versus Tolu is Nigerian. When a Nigerian tells you she doesn't like you, the voice, the tonality, you can't express that in a research, can you? Because you're still reporting that the report says they don't like you. But if you were there and just saw the animation, you would understand the problem is stronger than the statement I would have read in a report. So I do agree with Henry. As a practicing marketer, please be out there as frequently as you can and listen to the unfiltered truth from consumers. So what does this mean for consumers? It's to say, during a crisis like we are in now, and I'm sure this conversation is happening because marketers are feeling we're in a crisis, budgets are being cut, CEOs are not listening to us enough, CFOs have been given our jobs, all the things that Henry was saying. But I think during a crisis, just always understand that consumers will switch brands during a crisis. That is the reality. They will always switch brands. So for you then is to say, if I know that that is going to happen, the way I'm going to market to this is every day is an opportunity to recruit this consumer as if they've never bought me before. And we shall come to how do you do that. Number two, consumers will always look for alternatives outside of this category, all right? So if you're selling beer and things are really thick, consumers are likely to go drinking spirits because the kick they get is different, so they swap out of your category. And if people are swapping in and out of the category, either you participate in that category or you find what I think Henry was calling collaborations. Because there are times when collaborations help to make sure that both of you are benefiting from the swapping that is going on. And then the final thing is consumers squeeze. They wash their clothes less frequently, maybe they shower less frequently, or they use less cooking oil than they used before. They use less sugar than you. So they squeeze how they. So once you understand that, then you need to understand every occasion and say what occasion are they using. If I'm selling margarine, are they using it for spreading on bread? Are they using it for baking? What are they using it for? If you understand it is for spreading on bread, then you have to understand on average how many grams do they need to spread on the bread. Oh yeah, it is just possibly 20 grams. And provide them an SKU of 20 grams if it makes economic sense. So during times when people are squeezing out, you really, really have to go after SKUs that give them the accessibility, they make meaning to the occasion, but also drives a sweet price point that you don't want to exceed. The second implication of this is consumers are experimenting less. When people are under pressure, they experiment less. Because supposing I buy something and it fails, it means I need to find new money to go and buy something else. So once you understand that, it's a real opportunity for creating deepening relationships between the consumer and your product and your brand. But all of this has to be driven by some data, as Henry says, but a lot of consumer insights as well. Being clear, what occasions, what channels, when do they use this, with whom are they consuming it, and being able to respond to that, all right? I think the third and final thing is dealing with the leaking basket syndrome. As marketing people, we get frustrated because every time the study is coming back, your penetration is suffering. You're recruiting 1 million, you're losing 500,000. You're recruiting 2 million, you're losing 1 million. That's the leaking basket syndrome, and becomes a real crisis when people are under economic pressure. But that's the job to be done. And I think it's for that very reason that I do feel that a good marketing professional will always be secure and have a job to do. Because it is so dynamic, it is changing every day, and it confounds long-term predictions. You almost have to be on the button every week, every day. I propose a few approaches we could take to adapt to this kind of crisis, and Henry has spoken to some of them. I will not repeat those. Packaging innovation, to make sure that it is suitable for a price point, is accessible, and it answers specific occasions, all right? So packaging innovation during crisis is a good thing, and it requires that you work very closely with your innovations team, with your supply colleagues. That's number one. The intention of that is delivering value, accessibility, and being relevant to the occasion. The second thing is spend marketing dollars as close to the sales opportunity as possible, all right? Do not spend too far away from the sales decision. So again, Henry was right. Be as close to your commercial colleagues as much as possible so that together you co-create solutions where your marketing effort and sales opportunity are very close to each other. Persistently activate. When your brands go mute, quiet, docile during a crisis, consumers forget about you. So it is counterintuitive. But those brands that continue to invest during a crisis emerge stronger, and they will actually will always beat competition. So it is for you to have the power of conviction, to sit up with your CFO, with your MD, and convince them that actually during a crisis is a good time to continue investing rather than cut back. And I'm sure for you who are practicing marketing, you're having these conversations with your CFOs. Sharply reinforce your proposition. What do you really stand for? Don't become woolly. Don't become woolly during a crisis, because the listening of somebody in a flux is very short. The attention spans are very, very low. So drive your message very, very sharply. And for all of us who are, again, in this room, a brand sits on 3 legs. One is, what is your proposition? What makes you different? And what makes you distinctive or stand out? If you can always remember those 3 things, if it's an elevator and you just have 1 second to brief this consumer, will you tell them what you are about? Why are you different? And why are you distinctive from other people? So do not overcomplicate the messaging during these times of crisis. Be sharp in reinforcing that. Remember the 6 things I talked about. Tell consumers what is more. Yeah, what is more about your brand. Be able to tell them what is more. Tell them what are you saving them, what is less, less carbohydrates or whatever. Be clear. Easy to use. When a brand is easy to use during a crisis, you are likely to endear yourself to more consumers because they're in a flux, they're struggling. So reinforce the message of easy to use. Quality, and don't be woolly about quality. Does it work? Is it delivering on the promise of this thing will not let you down? It works all the time. If I'm going to buy soap and I get home, I'm not sure whether it is going to clean my clothes. So if you're communicating a detergent, be clear. Is it for stain removal? Is it for fabric care? What is it for? Because I want to be sure that I'm making the right decision, because I can't experiment, all right? Affordability, be very bold in communicating your price points, or working with your commercial colleagues in executing price points. Whenever you make changes of pricing, you have to make sure that you are doing that right, because people are really, really sensitive to what is the price, all right? And, just want to confirm to them that, the value you're offering, they can afford that. The final thing is put some flair into this, so some fun, right? And this is the elevation of experiences, all right? So if I'm going to use your brand, yes, I hear myself, it is tough, but I need some elevated experience. Give me some reason to feel uplifted while using your product. I know we have a fireplace, so maybe we shall answer some questions, but also hear some sharing from the room of how you guys are dealing with some of the things that I'm discussing with you. So I'll not try and pass the mic around. I know we are tight for time, but it will be good to hear some stories of what are you doing in your own organization to try and deal with some of these things. Internal stakeholder marketing, all right? During a crisis, you have to be the best salesperson for the marketing function in your organization. So the role of the CMO has to be handed to the CEO. You have to make sure that the CEO is in lockstep with what you're doing as a marketing person. Let them be your closest ally. You have to brief them. You have to show them what you're doing, to constantly remind them this is an investment. It's an investment we are making. It is something that will pay off, and demonstrate to them how, all right? So do not leave this job to only yourself and your team. You have to hand this back to the CEO and ensure that you're together driving this. The second thing is elevating your internal pitch. Sometimes marketing people, we undersell ourselves. So elevate your own internal pitch and almost ensure that it's undistinguishable, the existing of the organization and the marketing work you do. You always have to elevate your pitch. Put it as high as the organizational purpose. Ensure that the strategy is reflected in what you're doing. Ensure that the human resource conversations that are happening are all clustered around your brands and brand categories, so that if somebody had to rip marketing out, they're almost ripping out the soul of the organization. So you have to elevate your internal pitch. Be ruthlessly accountable. So I agree with Henry. Agree with the CEO. And I repeat, agree with the CEO. I have a view as a marketing person of what we need to measure. What else would you want us to measure and show you? Let them tell you. Once you've had that alignment, you then go figure out with your colleagues, how do we give them that evidence of measurement, all right? So ensuring that ruthless accountability for the financial investment is clear, especially to the CEO and the CFO. The final thing is be obsessed with brilliant execution. I can tell you I've been a marketing person. I started my career as a brand assistant. I've been blessed to be a CEO for many years. Any CEO is super delighted to brag about great work their people are doing in the city. When a CEO knows that you're going to put on the best execution in the city, they will come. They want to be there. They want to invite their friends. They want to tell the story. So be anal about brilliant execution. When CEOs think your work is clumsy, they tend to distance themselves. They wait for you in the boardroom to give you a hard time. When the job you're doing out here is really great, they want to be with you, they want to share the stage with you, they want to take the praise of, the work you're doing. So really ensure that, you always are focused on brilliant execution. So my final question, if I were a young person deciding what professional I should go into, would I be considering marketing now? Would you consider coming into marketing now? I would advise you, don't go to finance first to come back to marketing after 20 years. Just start properly. Start properly with marketing. So I would be saying, for a young person, please come to marketing. This is where the fun is. And I would be saying for those who are still considering a career, it's a great career. It's exciting. It's meaningful. It's what grows the business. It is what sustains growth, all right? So it's great talking to you. I know it's late in the evening. Hopefully next time we shall start early. Thanks for inviting me, William. And it's been great meeting you, Maria, again. Maria and I have known each other for many years. When I was still a junior brand manager, she gave me a chance to do work at Radio 1. So Maria, thank you very much. And I hope the partnership, helped both of our brands to grow. And for my colleagues at Uganda Breweries, my colleagues from Stanbic, thank you for staying out so late in the night. I hope all the sharing today is useful and helpful. And hey, Roger Stedman, thanks for the book, and obviously for all the work that you've done in East Africa and sharing your life with marketing people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Baker. Lessons to learn. We need another mic here, if we can. Do we have another mic? Real quick, we're running this real fast. We just want to hear from you. Do you have any questions for Baker or Henry? Yeah, I know our social batteries are running low, but please give it just a few minutes and we'll be out of here. But I'll start with the Honorable Maria. Like I said, once a honorable remains a honorable. Maria has some submissions to make.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll be very brief. I just come in to say hello and goodbye to Baker, to Roger, Colombo, and everybody. But I've been so enthralled by the discussion. Thank you very much, Kamau. Thank you very much, Baker. Sorry to miss your submission, Roger. I'd like to just to comment, to pull everything that Kamau has said and what Baker has said together. Because they're both absolutely right. It's like the elephant. Are you touching the leg or are you touching the trunk or the body? It's still the same thing. Marketing. What is marketing, especially in this brave new millennium. It's all about personal intervention. You can have all the digital pop-ups, whatever you call them, on your phone. But if you don't know anything about it, if you don't trust it, you won't click to what they say, learn more. Will you? You need to be convinced before you do that, especially now post-COVID. After people stayed home for a year, 2 years on their own, they need to be convinced before they do anything. You need the personal link before they view the utopia that's on social media or on digital or on online, whichever word you like to use. The conversation with the consumer is the first thing, as they've both said. You have to convince the consumer to listen to you. You have to do, these days, nothing is anymore one size fits all in advertising or in marketing. You have to do niche marketing. And I'll just very quickly give you an example of Radio 1. When we came on, there were already 4 FM stations on the airwaves. 4. And people said, there's no market for any more radio station. They're playing all the music. They're doing all the interventions. But then we said to the advertisers, we said, but we can connect to a forgotten group. And for Radio 1, the forgotten group was the people over 30, 35. Because when you talk to them in the focus groups that Baker has dismissed, but which were all the fashion then, you ask them, do you listen to radio? They say, no. Why? Because it's in the kids' bedroom. Why is it in the kids' bedroom? Oh, because they want to listen to their music. Don't you have any music? I do, but it's not on the radio. Oh, why not? I don't know. You know, in our days, the radio, there was good music. But this one is just noise, noise, noise. And we said, what would you do if you listen to the music of your time of growing up? They said, oh, I would listen. Bang, Radio 1. Great songs, great memories. And it's not music, it's songs. Songs are memories. The song when you're getting married, when you lost your parent, when you graduated, when you got your promotion at work. And that, by listening to that song, you're led to the marketing pitch. This is, for those of us who are media. Kawozi, how did it come in? Baker said, language. Language is the great unifier. More than income, language. Because language is what people use to communicate. So if you do a vernacular, you have to say, what vernacular is it? Radio 2 used Luganda because that's the vernacular of where Radio 2 is, Kabozi. But if it had been in the West, would have used one of the 4 R's. If it had been in the East, would have used language from the East or from the North. Communication. And when you're communicating, we said, what does Radio 2 need to do? Because people called us and said, I listened to your health show, but can I speak in Luganda when I ask my question? I listened to your news on Radio 1. You have 3 Luganda newscasts, but can you do more? I listened to your information clips, but I have a problem. I'm a single mother in Akazigo with 4 children, and I'd really like some advice on how to live, how to manage them. So it was not skits. It was not music. They had those already from the existing vernacular stations, but they wanted things to help them with their lifestyle. So Henry, yes, you need to know where's the consumer, what are they doing. So we used to do traffic surveys at traffic lights. And by those surveys, we knew who was the consumer where are they coming from, where are they going to, how long do they take to commute, what time they woke up, what time they went to bed, do they go to a bar on the way home, can they afford it? So when we came to the advertisers, we could say, listen, here's your consumer for, and let's look at UBL in deference to Baker. Here's your consumer to Senator. He's got a different lifestyle from the consumer for Bell. And for Johnny Walker, oh, that's a different one. And because we could connect with the consumers, that's how the message went out. So all the media companies here, you have to connect with the consumer for your customers. And once you connect, then they put on their customized advert or the promotion, whatever. Oh, I forgot, Henry, I mustn't use the word promotion. What they want to do. Can I borrow your name, Henry? Mm-hmm. May I? Henry Kamau Njoroge. Njoroge is different from Kamau. Kamau is different from Henry, not so? So you have to decide in your consumer what particular part of the consumer you want to use. He said he was Kamau Njoroge. Then he said that my parents joined a sect, so they called me Henry. So he's not that fond of his name of Henry, but he accepts it. So you have to watch it when you're talking to Henry, how you call him. Every day is the first day of your broadcasting life. That's what we say in the media. It doesn't matter how many people listened to you yesterday, or viewed your TV yesterday, or drank your beer, or used your cell phone services. Every day is new. And I'd just like to close very quickly by looking at the promoters or the sponsors. Why is Hotel Africana a sponsor? Because they deal in conferences, and you corporates are the ones who pay for conferences. Why is New Vision here? Because it's a premier broadcasting, print, online media group. Yes, but Radio 1 is also there. Not Vision's Radio, Radio 1. Because Radio 1 is the one that goes more to the clientele here today. Why do we have Kenya Airways? I think it brought Colombo, right? Pride Forex. Why is Pride Forex here? Because it's hoping that the travelers here or the hotel guests who may be coming by will change their money through them, their Forex. Why is Radio 1 here? We call ourselves the corporate radio station. Have I left anybody out?
No, you got it all.
I've got them all.
Yeah.
So on that point, I'll say that different strokes for different folks. Know what your product or service is and what is the niche market. You can't say you get everybody. People used to say to us, Radio 1 only goes 15% of the population. We said 15%, that's a big. We thought we only had 10% because we deal with the corporates. Mm-hmm. But if you say 15%, that is great. What is your coverage? We say 85% of the monetized economy. Baker talked about purchasing power. 85% of the monetized economy. So it doesn't matter whether we go 100 miles or 1,000. If we have the purchasing power, that's where people want to market.
Sure.
Because if you're marketing only on price, you don't need to market. You can just go digital and say, I'm going to sell you bread at 5 shillings a loaf. They'll beat a path to your door, right? But everyone here is not competing on price. None of you. You all have premium products and services, and you want to make sure your markets know about your attributes, your features, your benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A big round of applause. Do we have any questions from the audience? And by the way, thank you so much for sticking around. I know some people have left, but it means a lot for us to have you in the audience. Yes, Amy Hashakimana, the accountant, who is now the commercial director, by the way, commercial director for Uganda Breweries, for your information.
I've been warned on this table that I'll be beaten if I don't adhere to. Anyway, mine is about marketing in different cultures. And I think the context to the question, I know, Henry, you've talked about your work in Kenya, you're now in Uganda, you were in Mozambique before. Becca, I've had the pleasure of seeing you in operation in very different markets, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda as well. So as you're marketing in different cultures and contexts, how do you get the balance right between, on one hand, a human truth is a human truth, on the other hand, there's market nuances. So how do you get that balance right?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Culture, the role of culture in consumer behavior and choice. Like I said, marketing exists at three levels. So you're saying, what is my proposition? Why is it distinctive? And why is it different? But I think when you are describing proposition, that's where the word relevance, shows up. How do I remain relevant? And for you guys who are marketing, John Walker, you talk a lot about being in culture, all right? So it is being able to touch the things that are most important, most resonant in the group of people you're trying to speak to, all right? Let me take an example of marketing Malta Guinness in northern Nigeria in a city called Kano or Kaduna. Anything and almost everything drunk in that part of the world needs to be halal. In fact, not drunk, eaten. Even rice has to be halal. Halal in the Muslim culture means good to eat, I think, right? So, although that product was acceptable everywhere else, in the north of Nigeria, it was rejected because their head of the religion had not endorsed it as halal. So we needed to know that and work on that. And it took possibly 5 years to get the head of the Muslim faith in that region to endorse it halal. And once that was done, the rest was history, all right? So it's being able to understand the influencers who most influence the decision making. What are the codes in this culture that when you get right, things resonate, and when you get wrong, you have a problem, all right? You've heard about brands that commit mistakes, either the way they communicate their brand or the things they attach the brand associations to, and sometimes they get rejected or even thrown out of the country. During the apartheid era in 1995, I was working in South Africa when South Africa was just getting independent, and Coca-Cola was equal to Americans, equal to the folks who were sponsoring apartheid, all right? So in some of the areas, Coca-Cola was really under trouble. And we suffered at the time. I was working for Coke. But we needed to understand, therefore, how do you get to Mandela? How do you get to the people who are taking over the new power and actually demonstrate and illustrate that this is not true? So if you may remember, Coca-Cola was part of the distribution network of SABCO, SAB Miller, who were the guys who were producing Castle. So the association was very strong, that this is a big multinational who had been supporting the apartheid regime. So they had to work on that. So you are right, Amy, when you're marketing in a community or to a society, is to understand what are the hot buttons, which if I press right, this works well. And if I really do not take good care on this, it can ruin your brand. And sometimes it's inadvertent, but you just have to make sure that you take care of that. I know one of the discussions we had many years ago when Mr. Karombo invited me at a marketer's night in Nairobi. Tiger Woods was going through his personal troubles.
But there are several things you need to plug in, and I think my most challenging market was initially Mozambique. You go to a country which speaks Portuguese, an East African who's English speaking, Swahili speaking. The company luckily was English speaking. So when you go to the market, especially from the center going down, everyone is just speaking Portuguese. The only place I used to shine is in the north, where everyone speaks Swahili. So at least there, no one was translating to my seniors. But one of the things which I remember working on a brand campaign, and we wanted to very much ingrain with the cultures or with the message to the particular young, progressive, between the ages of about 18 to about 24. That was actually, I remember that was a bullseye segment. And when we went through a research, and it was actually quite eye-opening, we thought maybe, for example, the young people in the urban areas are the ones who are they're the ones who are even happier than the young guys in the rural areas. And we actually found that because of pressures of life, the young guys in the urban areas are actually more stressed and more they're actually more stressed about life than the guys in the rural areas. But the people in the rural areas, all of them want to come to urban areas. So, and then at the same time as well, Mozambique, because of they've gone through a lot of wars and everything, guys live for today. They don't think about tomorrow. If you want to stress a sales guy, give him a meeting on Monday morning, because guys leave the beach at 3 a.m. They don't care about tomorrow's work. If you go, for example, to Kenya on a Sunday, by 2 o'clock, everyone is in their house because tomorrow is working 2 p.m. Here, I think we stretch it until about 9, 10 p.m. So we ran a campaign called Viva Agora, which means live now. It's actually one of the most successful campaigns we have ran, and it resonated and drove our brand metrics really high. Second thing as well, partnerships, especially when you're on execution, because our products is very homogeneous. You're very right, especially on data. At least for voice, you know the other person who's calling. In data, I don't know, so you spend on your own. So it's only one person. So because of that, we have to go with what he has called influencers, people who can be able to influence behavior. So in Mozambique have this crazy thing of every single city has its own holiday. So you can be in Jinja. Jinja is a holiday, but it's not a holiday in Kampala. Or you can be in Entebbe. Entebbe is a holiday. It's a holiday because that's a city day, but Kampala is not a holiday. So what you end up having what I call like almost 50-something days city holiday. So the problem is, you're in Gayaza it's a holiday, but you work in town. So how does it work? Because so we partnered with every single one of those and actually sponsored that particular event because it's a big thing for the city. It also has some political mileage. That in itself, and consistently did actually help us because everyone who was talking in their local language. Everyone who's performing in local language. And even Vodacom that time was being seen as a South African brand. We changed that completely and went on the ground and were able to do that. So there are some products basically functional as to happen, but at that point, it actually depends on execution. But that's what I would say.
All right. I think we need to go home. There's a burning question there, but I thought this was going to be the last one on that table. Yes. Oh, yeah. Last question over there. So, thanks.
Sorry for keeping you past your bedtime. This is for you, Mr. Baker, and also Mr. Njoroge could speak to that. I speak to you as somebody who has worn multiple hats, both in terms of the department for marketing, but also from a leadership point of view. In terms of the role of organization culture in setting up the marketing function for success in driving growth. I ask this because I'm also an ex-telco person. And quite often I saw a bit of skewed incentives that led to short-termism. For example, you had the sales team being given targets to bring in, revenue or sales, new acquisitions. and the person who was accountable for retention was the customer care team, for an example. And if you brought in trash, you know how it is. It's trash in, trash out. But the person who brought in the trash is not the one who's being held accountable for the churn. You know what I'm saying, Mr. Njoroge? So, how do we build a culture across the different departments, especially with this nexus where you have the retention department, which is customer care, you have marketing and sales now that are beginning to look a bit more merged in such a way that the incentives are more longer term as opposed to each person living for the day in terms of hitting their short-term goals, but at the cost of the longer-term gain for the organization?
I will address that one. I think the second point I said on what the survey came up with is about alignment at C-suite. And there's a point about long-term and short-term objectives. When you're a business where or basically, for example, if you're a CMO, your main goal is about growth. Growth, and we have said the growth is actually determined by the top line. And the top line is basically a simple formula. It's actually usage versus rate. So if at all somebody else is incentivized in a different way, that definitely is a defeating activity. Nowadays we have commission structures which are more than just 3 months after the customer comes in. So definitely that's actually a very easy thing. But if at all at the top line, basically the top level you're aligned, you not have any such issues. Because I know what you're talking about. Sales guys have to bring new acquisitions. A guy has a target of 20,000. He brings what you call fake activation. Those can be, but I think if it's aligned at C-suite level, that will not be an issue. And that's part of the reason why you're finding sales and marketing being very close nowadays. So if he messes up, you're there with him. And if you don't give him the tools, he's there with you. So definitely that alignment is good. Baker?
Yeah, I think the question is answered. Organizational culture is a broad subject, of course. There are many influences to why culture becomes what it is in an organization. But I think it starts from who is leading the organization, right? If whatever the title, chief executive, whatever, that individual has to be invested in, we will deliver sustainable long-term growth by investing in our most precious assets. And they always tend to be two things, is have the best people in the city executing against the best brands. If you get those two things right, and you're really convinced about it, you talk the walk. You don't walk the talk. You talk the walk as the chief executive. It will show. But if people are doing the work you're asking them to do, go out there, fight for market share, recruit consumers, go do activations, you don't show up. Every time they invite you, you have something more important to do at the golf club or something more exciting to go and attend, the organization will read it, that this is not important. For those who worked with me I was still here, we stayed out together up to 2 a.m., 3 a.m., not because I'm an outgoing person, but because the things they were doing needed to be elevated so that when we go back the next morning, we are all saying how we were there, how people felt, what really went well. And you as the chief executive, to be honest, you carry the mantle and you are the one who elevates what is important in the organization. So it's people and it's brands. Your behavior has got to support what they're doing, and you need to illustrate that. On incentives, I'm not an HR expert, but I'll be saying incentives have got to reward both business outcomes. Number two, the culture you want to build in the organization, and there should be a good balance between short-term and long-term. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Becca. I think it's been a good night. If anybody else has a question, we can always share. I know Mr. Kalombo and team will share, details, but we also have an email where you can email your questions. We also have telephone numbers where you can reach out as long as it is about questions, asking Baker and Kamau, not asking about some other detail about the host. I thank you so much. I think for me, my take home is that we must understand finance as marketers. If you don't understand finance, you don't understand the business. And therefore, you can easily be endangered. And the next thing you know, the likes of Kamau, the likes of Amy, who are accountants, are taking over the marketing jobs. And the next thing you know, you have no job. As you, the professional marketer who went to school and studied marketing, and you know, you have all these CIM, whatever. I see people putting them on their LinkedIn, but look, it has to make sense to the business. Whatever it is that we're going to do out there, as we go out there, let us be reminded that we need to speak the language that the chief executives understand. And the only language that they understand is the language of numbers. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. And thank you so much for keeping around. But I think our take-home is very clear. It's really very clear. Understand the numbers, understand finance. Simple as that. That is the language of business. Again, if you don't understand that, then there's no reason for you to remain in that marketing role. I thank you so much, Baker. Thank you, Mr. Kamau. Well, our former photographers. Wait, Baker, wait. My friend, I've waited for this picture for long. Do you know when the last time I saw you? I really need this photo, and then we'll call it. Can we remove this so we get a proper picture with